Amanda Knox was just 20 years old when her life changed forever. She had left her hometown in Seattle, United States, with dreams that were simple and innocent, studying abroad, learning a new language, and experiencing the beauty of Europe. Italy felt like a dream to her. The cobbled streets of Perugia, the historic buildings, the warmth of student life, everything seemed full of promise. Amanda was curious, expressive, and open in a way that would later be used against her. In November 2007, Amanda's world collapsed. Her British roommate, Meredith Kirker, was found murdered in their shared apartment. The crime shocked the small Italian city and quickly attracted intense media attention. Fear spread, pressure mounted, and authorities were desperate for answers. In that panic-filled environment, Amanda Knox went from being a grieving roommate to the main suspect. She did not understand how it happened so fast. Amanda cooperated fully with the police. She answered questions for hours, often without a lawyer, exhausted and confused in a foreign country where she barely spoke the language. What should have been a search for the real criminal turned into something else, a hunt for a story that fit fear, stereotypes, and public appetite for scandal. Investigators began to interpret Amanda's behavior through suspicion rather than empathy. She was accused of acting strangely, of not grieving in the right way. Her personality, her smiles, her nervousness, her openness was twisted into evidence of guilt. The media labeled her cruel names, portraying her not as a frightened young woman but as a monster hiding behind an innocent face. What the world did not see was the fear. Inside police interrogation rooms, Amanda was questioned aggressively. She later described being shouted at, slapped on the head, and pressured to imagine scenarios that never happened. Exhausted and broken, she was pushed into signing statements she did not fully understand. Those statements would become the foundation of a case built more on speculation than proof. Soon, Amanda Knox was arrested. She was placed in an Italian prison, far from her family, her country, and any sense of safety. The walls were cold, the routines harsh, and the language barrier isolating. She was no longer a student or a daughter, she was now the accused. International media followed her every move, judging her expressions, her body language, even her past. Headlines decided her guilt long before any court did. Meanwhile, the real focus of justice slipped away. Evidence at the crime scene pointed toward another man, Rudy Guetti, whose DNA was clearly present. He would later be convicted. Yet Amanda remained imprisoned, painted as the mastermind of a crime she consistently denied committing. The narrative was already written, and changing it seemed impossible. Amanda's family watched helplessly from the United States. They believed in her innocence, but belief felt powerless against a system and media storm determined to destroy her. Her parents spoke publicly, hired lawyers, and begged the world to see Amanda as a human being, not a headline. Still, the pressure only grew. In prison, Amanda learned what it meant to be forgotten by fairness. She spent years behind bars, sharing cells with women who carried their own stories of pain. She struggled with depression, fear, and the crushing weight of knowing the world believed she was guilty. Some days, she questioned herself not because she was guilty, but because the system around her was so confident she was. That is how injustice works. It makes the innocent doubt their own reality. Yet, even in the darkest moments, Amanda held on to one thing: the truth. She wrote letters. She read books. She tried to keep her mind alive in a place designed to erase identity. She told herself that one day, facts would matter more than fear. That science would speak louder than rumors. That justice, though slow and imperfect, would eventually listen. Outside prison walls, the case divided the world. Some believed Amanda was guilty, others saw her as a victim of a broken system. Documentaries were made, debates erupted, and journalists questioned how a young foreign woman became the symbol of evil so easily. Was it her nationality? Her gender? Her refusal to fit into expectations of how a proper victim should behave? Amanda did not ask for sympathy. She asked for fairness. She asked for evidence to matter more than imagination. She asked for a system that protected the innocent rather than sacrificing them to public pressure. Most of all, she asked for the chance to prove what she had said from the beginning, that she did not commit the crime. As years passed, cracks began to appear in the case against her. Independent experts questioned the forensic evidence. Courts reconsidered earlier decisions. Slowly, painfully, the truth fought its way through layers of error and ego. But in Chapter 1 of Amanda Knox's story, justice was still far away. She remained behind bars, labeled and judged, while the real meaning of justice waited to be rediscovered. Her story was no longer just about one crime. It had become a warning about how easily the world can destroy a person before the truth is known. And this was only the beginning. Prison did not arrive all at once for Amanda Knox. It settled into her life slowly, like a shadow that refused to leave. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then into years. Each morning began the same way. The sound of keys, the echo of footsteps, the reminder that freedom was something happening elsewhere. Italy, the country she had once associated with art, language, and discovery, had become a cage she could not escape. Amanda was transferred between prisons, each colder than the last. The language barrier isolated her further. Conversations happened around her, not with her. Guards spoke quickly, impatiently. Other inmates looked at her with curiosity or suspicion, having already heard the stories painted by the media. She was not just a prisoner, she was infamous. Outside, the world was not quiet. Italian tabloids and international media turned Amanda's case into entertainment. Her face appeared on television screens, newspapers, and magazines across the globe. Commentators analyzed her smile, her posture, her personality. They built narratives around who they thought she was, not who she actually was. The term trial by media became painfully real. By the time the court sessions began, public opinion had already decided her fate. Inside the courtroom, the truth struggled to breathe. Prosecutors relied on questionable forensic evidence and speculative theories. DNA samples were mishandled. Crime scene procedures violated basic standards. Independent experts later confirmed that key evidence was unreliable. Yet during the trial, these issues were brushed aside. Emotion mattered more than accuracy. Story mattered more than science. Amanda listened as strangers described her as manipulative, immoral, and dangerous. She heard prosecutors' false motivations attributed to her. She watched as her private life was dragged into court, as if her character alone could prove a crime. She wanted to scream that none of it was real, that it was all built on assumptions, but her voice felt small against the machinery of accusation. The conviction came like a physical blow. Amanda Knox was found guilty and sentenced to over 26 years in prison. The moment the verdict was announced, the courtroom erupted. Some celebrated. Cameras flashed. Headlines raced ahead of reality. Amanda felt herself disappear beneath the weight of injustice. She was 22 years old and facing decades behind bars for a crime she did not commit. She struggled with nightmares, anxiety, and thoughts she was afraid to name. Some days, she barely spoke. Other days, she clung to routine reading, exercising, learning Italian more fluently, not because she felt hopeful, but because survival demanded structure. She reminded herself that innocence was not something a court could take away, even if it could take everything else. Her family refused to give up. From the United States, Amanda's parents fought tirelessly. They hired legal experts, consulted forensic specialists, and worked with journalists willing to look beyond sensational headlines. Appeals were filed. Mistakes were documented. Slowly, a counter-narrative began to emerge, one rooted in facts, not fear. One critical moment came when independent forensic experts were appointed by the appeals court. Their findings were devastating to the prosecution's case. Key DNA evidence was declared contaminated and unreliable. The foundation of the original conviction began to crack. For the first time in years, the system was forced to confront its own errors. In 2011, after nearly 4 years in prison, Amanda Knox was acquitted on appeal. She walked free, her legs trembling, her emotions overwhelming. Cameras followed her as she returned to the United States. Many believed the nightmare was over. Amanda herself hoped she could finally begin healing, rebuilding a life stolen by accusation. But injustice was not finished with her yet. In a shocking reversal, Italy's highest court annulled the acquittal and ordered a retrial. The news crashed into Amanda's life like a second arrest. Once again, she was labeled a fugitive. Once again, headlines questioned her innocence. The fear returned, not of prison walls, but of uncertainty that never seemed to end. Amanda chose not to return to Italy for the retrial, fearing immediate imprisonment. Critics called her decision proof of guilt. Supporters understood it as self-preservation. The legal battle dragged on, stretching her endurance and her sanity. She lived in a state of suspended existence, free but never truly safe. During this time, Amanda transformed. She began speaking publicly not to defend herself emotionally, but to explain how systems fail. She spoke about coercive interrogations, confirmation bias, and the danger of judging people based on behavior rather than evidence. She became a voice for the wrongfully accused, even while her own fate remained uncertain. Finally, in 2015, the highest court in Italy issued its final ruling. Amanda Knox was fully and permanently acquitted. The court acknowledged that there was no evidence linking her to the crime. The nightmare that had defined nearly 8 years of her life officially ended. There was no apology, no compensation equal to what she had lost, but there was truth, written into legal history. Yet freedom did not erase the damage. Amanda had lost years of her youth, her privacy, her sense of safety. She would carry the psychological scars forever. But she refused to be defined solely by what was done to her. Instead, she chose to define herself by what she survived. Chapter 2 of Amanda Knox's story is not just about prison or courts. It is about how easily justice can be distorted, how truth can be buried beneath narrative, and how strength sometimes means enduring the unbearable without surrendering your identity. And still, her story was not over. Because justice, once delayed, leaves behind questions the world must answer. Freedom did not arrive with celebration for Amanda Knox. It arrived quietly, almost cautiously, as if the world itself was unsure how to face the truth after years of getting it wrong. When Italy's highest court finally and permanently acquitted her in 2015, the legal battle ended, but the emotional and social consequences did not. Justice, delayed for nearly 8 years, had come at a devastating cost. Amanda was no longer a prisoner, yet she was not free in the way people imagine freedom. Her name remained tied to one of the most sensational criminal cases of the modern era. Some headlines corrected themselves. Others never did. The internet remembered everything: rumors, accusations, speculation long after the courts had spoken clearly. What Amanda faced next was something rarely discussed: life after wrongful accusation. She struggled to rebuild an identity separate from the case. Simple things: walking alone, trusting strangers, sleeping without fear required effort. Trauma does not vanish when prison doors open, it follows you home. Amanda dealt with anxiety, panic attacks, and the haunting sense that her life could be torn apart again at any moment. Yet she refused to disappear. Instead of retreating from the world that had judged her, Amanda chose to engage with it carefully, deliberately, and with purpose. She began speaking publicly, not in anger, but in clarity. She explained how false confessions happen, how media narratives influence investigations, and how young, vulnerable people can be broken under pressure without ever being guilty. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight. Amanda wrote a memoir, not to relive pain, but to reclaim her story. She described the fear of interrogations, the loneliness of prison, and the confusion of being misrepresented so completely. The book was not an attempt to convince skeptics, it was an act of truth-telling. For many readers, it revealed a side of the justice system they had never questioned before. Over time, Amanda became an advocate. She worked with organizations that support the wrongfully accused, exonerees, and victims of coercive interrogations. She spoke at universities, conferences, and legal forums. Her message was not about herself, it was about systems. She emphasized that wrongful convictions are rarely caused by one bad actor, they are created by pressure, bias, and the refusal to admit mistakes. One of the most difficult aspects of Amanda's journey was learning to live with the fact that not everyone would accept her innocence. Even after final acquittal, some people clung to old beliefs. For Amanda, this was perhaps the deepest injustice, not legal, but human. The realization that truth does not automatically change minds was painful, yet it strengthened her resolve to focus on those willing to listen. Justice, she learned, is not only a verdict, it is a responsibility. Amanda also confronted another complex reality. Her story was forever linked to a real tragedy: the loss of Meredith Kirker's life. Amanda consistently expressed compassion for Meredith and her family, acknowledging their pain while maintaining her innocence. She understood that multiple truths could exist at once: that a horrific crime occurred, and that she was not responsible for it. This understanding shaped her maturity. Years after her acquittal, Amanda returned to Italy not as a defendant, but as a woman who had survived the worst of its justice system and still chose dialogue over bitterness. Her return symbolized something rare, the courage to face a place of trauma without being defined by it. Amanda built a life beyond the courtroom. She found love, built friendships rooted in trust, and created routines that grounded her. She became a writer, a speaker, and a thinker, someone who understood the fragile line between guilt and innocence better than most. Her story began to shift in public memory. No longer just the accused, Amanda Knox became a case study in wrongful prosecution, media bias, and systemic failure. Law students studied her case. Journalists re-examined their roles. Investigators debated what should have been done differently. Slowly, the narrative evolved not because time passed, but because truth endured. Amanda never claimed that justice was perfect in the end. She knew it could never return the years stolen from her youth, the mental scars, or the relationships strained by suspicion. But she also knew that justice, even when incomplete, could still create change. And change did come. Her case influenced discussions about interrogation practices, forensic standards, and media ethics. It forced uncomfortable questions into public spaces. It reminded the world that confidence is not evidence, and that assumptions can destroy lives. In the final chapter of Amanda Knox's story, there is no dramatic courtroom scene, no sudden applause. Instead, there is something far more powerful: a woman who survived injustice and refused to let it turn her into silence. She became proof that being innocent is not always enough, but persistence, truth, and courage can eventually expose even the deepest failures. Amanda Knox was once known as a suspect, then as a prisoner. Today, she is known as a survivor of injustice. And her story stands as a warning and a hope that justice, though fragile and flawed, can still be demanded, defended, and redefined by those brave enough to speak after the world tried to silence them.